We'll start right up then. Okay, do we have any questions? Let's see.
I see Lorraine's hand.
Oh, good. All right, Lorraine.
Oops, let me take my little tape off here. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for your for showing us your work and talking. It's just really fascinating. I think the thing that really hit me, and maybe I'm not right, but it seemed like your career in art started kind of late in life. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you are. You are absolutely right about that.
Yeah, good, yeah.
So, my first career in art started young, like many people's does. I actually was a vocalist. And so I sang all through high school in high school choir and like all the, plays that we did, Brigadoon, you name it. And part of the reason I chose to go to undergrad in New York City from DC is because I believed I was going to be on Broadway. And my mother was like, I don't like 1 minute of this. But so I spent the first 2 years of college basically flunking out while I was trying to audition for Broadway, and quickly realized you can't do both. And at that point, could not support myself in New York City. And so I settled into finishing my degree and was very fortunate that my activist voice during that time had found itself because I went to school in a very difficult environment, quite frankly.
A difficult environment, like, I think you're frozen, Cheryl.
We're in the settlement movement, so I was active. Okay, am I back?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I was saying, oh, I see my connection is unstable. So I was active in these movements on campus, anti-racism, divestment from South Africa during that time, and just, settled into sort of the activist side of my life and found a career that supported that, which it turned out was actually the city planning degrees. But I went to my first eviction blocking in college during that time that I believed I would be on Broadway. And so it sort of led me down this path of, okay, if I have to have a day job, I'd like for my day job to be related to like real estate and housing issues and be involved in community development. I think like most artists, it doesn't go away just because your parents may want it to go away, particularly when they too were artists, whether they ever owned that or not in their lifetime. And so by my 30s is when I said, I think I'll take an art class after work. And at that time, the Corcoran Museum was open in DC, and they had the Corcoran College of Art and Design. So I took a lot of continuing education classes there in ceramics and sculpture. And by the time I had done a certificate there is when the glass studio had opened, and then really never touched a piece of clay again,
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I mean, for reference, part of the reason I didn't stay a glass blower, I learned how to blow glass when I was 39 and 40 years old.
Cool.
Hello, Andre? You're muted. Can you unmute? Okay.
I just wanted to thank you for such an incredible presentation. I was blown away.
Oh, thank you.
I did not know how much, a little bit about your work, but not the extent to which it went. And so I really just want to say that it's very much appreciated and unknown to a lot of us, and how very much you have accomplished, even though you started later in life. So just a thank you and a kudo.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, I think it's always important for us to sort of step back and remember a woman's art career does not often follow the same trajectory as a man's art career. I know in some ways there are men who may begin later in life, but there's a lot about the art world that has been geared around, cute white male painter in his 20s. I mean, that, from when Jackson Pollock was cute white male painter in his 20s, And so I think we see now that a woman's art career can definitely run a very fulfilling trajectory, but it may in fact go on much later in life, and I'm thinking about even more recently, I paid a lot of attention the past year. I did not get to Venice, but it was not lost on me that Sonia Boyce of the UK won a Golden Lion at the Venice Biennale. This is a 58-year-old, British African artist woman. Certainly Simone Yvette Lee was representing the US. This is a 54-year-old Black woman artist. Some of my personal favorite artists worked well into their 90s in the case of Louise Bourgeois. I love everything Ursula von Rindesgaard, her sculpture, nothing thrills me more than seeing her on the ladder with the chainsaw at 80 working on the big sculpture. So I think, it's important for us to remember that sometimes our careers are really just hitting their stride, and it takes the art world a while to catch up with us.
Okay, we have another question here.
Hello.
Quinn Liu, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I'm just start typing. I recognize you're like me. I'm also like have dual career. So I have environmental science. Environmental scientist, also doing art. Also I'm immigrant, come to here. You have to find your voice. It took me a little while to find my voice. That's I really share that type of journey with you. But I like to know how you feel the challenge you face when you want to catch up with everybody else. They're already ahead in a curve. And how you feel? What is the struggle? I just want to, get to that little bone, to see how we can share same thought or idea or inspiration.
Yes. Well, I think for me, first off, and I hope it's the same way for you, I enjoy making. So whatever your practice is, I hope that you feel invigorated by it and you enjoy it, because I think that is what will make you able to go the distance, So I am, okay, if I blow up my Wi-Fi, please forgive me, but I'm going to try to get a piece on my website to share and give you an example of this. So let me get, if I can get, all right, so far so good. The computer is not falling apart, but it's moving slowly. But I want to show you this piece because I think it gets at the core of what you're saying about, just needing to sustain. And so, okay, good. That's up. I'm on Zoom. I'm sharing the screen. Okay, so this piece is called 2017 Year at a Glance, 214 Dead Black Men. So I hand stamp a bullet for every day in a particular year that a Black man was killed by the police. I had actually started making this work personally in 2015. I felt called to do it. I wasn't sure if I would ever show it, wasn't sure where it was going to go. I just knew I needed to do this work. And I wanted to do some work that was not in my opinion, exploitative. I didn't want to show the images of people as they lay dying, or I didn't want to show faces. I wanted to be respectful of families, but I wanted to get at this issue of this has become too comfortable and too normalized in America. Okay, so I'm just making the work. So I did show one of the pieces at Root Division one year, and people kind of looked at it and they liked it and they talked about it, but that was pretty much it. All right, let's go. Flash forward 3 years later, 2020, we know what's happening in our society. The DeYoung has a show, the DeYoung Open, and their theme for the show is On the Edge. I'm like, oh, wow, I should probably put one of those police brutality works in there because that's pretty much on the edge. I entered the work into the DeYoung Open and it got in. And not only did it get in, the DeYoung then called me and said, we would like to promote your work in our press information. I was like, please do. Who can go wrong with that, And so they began to include it in their press packages. And so that work, which I just started making because I felt called to in 2015, had only shown in like 1 or 2 small nonprofit settings, blew up 5 years after I started it because it was the right time. It was in the Guardian, it was in the New York Times, it was in the San Francisco Chronicle, who knew? And ultimately, the DeYoung actually acquired the piece that I showed with them for their permanent collection. So that's a long-winded example to just say, you have to make your work. Just keep making your work. And at some point, it may be the right time or the right audience for that work.
Mhm.
Well said. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
You didn't show that piece in your presentation. That's really inspiring.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was mindful of our time, I mean, we can go a little over, that's fine. But, we had an hour. So I was like, okay, 45 minutes and make sure I get some pieces that really exemplify,
So if we have more questions, you will have more surprises.
That's right. Who knows what we'll have to look at. Okay.
Well, I think what we'll do is, because it's 6 now, we are going to just thank Cheryl completely, but then we'll continue with whoever would like to stay.
Okay.
Because I noticed that Charmaine has a question. So please feel free to stay and we'll continue this discussion as long as we've got people interested.
Great.
Charmaine?
Hi there, Cheryl. So thank you so much for that presentation. I was so impressed by your Harriet Tubman public sculpture, and
Thank you.
and just beautiful. And I do a fair amount of public art, so it's really inspiring to see what can be done. And more so, I mean, wow, I learned so much about her. It was pretty incredible, all of the details that you were able to add to that. And yeah, I also had the question of the young glassblowers.
Yeah.
How big are those pieces?
Thank you. Those pieces are 12 by 18 inches each.
Okay, and do you show them as a group, sort of all together?
Well, they were shown as a group online in the initial show that Habitat Fine Art did. So they were shown together online. Now, in talking to the Museum of Glass for their physical presentation, they picked 2 pieces. So they want the 2 for, the theme of the show. They picked the 2 that actually are the 2 different groupings of young Black boys. And they're going to build a vitrine to show the 2 together. Because I told him, I said, well, part of the reason, I made them 18 inches is there's actually an off the rack museum shelf that one of the suppliers I used, Bullseye Glass, actually makes. So to make it easy, at the time, for a collector, you know, because it was Habitat Gallery. I was like, okay, let me make them to fit on this shelf. And then that's easy if a collector wants to buy them. But the museum, you know, has a number of younger visitors and they're just like, oh, we don't know that we want them on the wall or the shelf. We think we want to put them in a case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have a question.
Mhm.
Just wondering, these images that you're using, where is the reference? Where is the, you know, where, in what time of year is coming, or, you know, how old are they? Because you mentioned also Louise Hine, the photographer who has been doing this. So just wondering, what is this images that you're using?
Sure. So all of the images I use either come from public domain library collections, or they come from, in some cases, library collections where I purchase or negotiate the rights to use the image. That's a little more rare. But for the Mary Ellen Pleasant work, as life would have it, a lot of things about her are spread out in several different collections, either in private collections, or by private, I mean places like the Huntington Library, for example, was a place that I had to get the rights to an image. And so I, you know, as an artist, am always concerned about other artists' copyright. And so that's why I traditionally use either the public domain images, or in the case of the Richmond work, my own photographs. So there is no copyright issue. But all of the historical images that I use either come from public domain, or I've paid for the rights to use them.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And, you know, for what it's worth, once, because you never know, as I said, when something is the right time, as soon as the young got excited and wanted to like publicize my piece, my next call was to the lawyer. And I said, hi, so this great thing is happening. And I'm pretty sure the At a Glance calendar company has some copyright or some trademark. And he said, and he said, okay, let's talk about that. But one of the things I had done when that started was I let At a Glance know I was coming. So I started tagging them in my social media post. And then after a few tags, I reached out to them and said, hi, I'm an artist. This is what it's about. Can you, you know, get on a call with me or your legal team and my lawyer, and let's negotiate X amount of rights for me to be able to continue to do this work. And it's 2020, it's a calendar company. I gave them a massive gift, and they fortunately recognized that I had given. Their marketing person was like, hello, Midwest calendar people. We were not involved in a Black Lives Matter conversation. And look at us, we are relevant. And so, you know, by the time it came to the New York Times, you better bet, At a Glance had that piece. Look at us in the New York Times with artists on their own social media.
All right.
Other questions?
Do we have any other questions?
All right, should I show one more secret piece that we didn't get to from the website? It's not a secret,
Sure.
it's on the website.
Yes.
All right, so just again, in terms of finding your voice and this issue we've been talking about, where do images come from? So this is some newer work, and all of this, I'll put my website in the chat if you don't have it. This is some newer work I started in the winter. As Mary mentioned in my bio, I was the inaugural BIPARC artist at the Corning Museum of Glass in Corning, New York. So they actually have a studio program and an artist in residence program, and we're proactive about wanting to encourage glass artists of color. And so building on the Thomas Jefferson work that I started at the French Consulate, I wanted to dive more deeply into the Black side of his family, which were the Hemings. And so most people know Sally Hemings, which was the enslaved woman that bore 6 of his children. But a lot of people also didn't know about her brother, James Hemings. Her older brother was actually Thomas Jefferson's enslaved chef, and he had traveled first with Jefferson to France. He trained to be the highest level of French chef. He rose to the rank of chef de cuisine. He was fluent in English and French, even though Jefferson never really learned how to speak French. But he came home from France and stayed enslaved for several more years because his sister was now pregnant with children by Thomas Jefferson. So he stayed with family. So the work you're looking at that I started doing during my residency in Corning, the back is a very large panel that is the only known writing that was saved of James Hemings. And so it's an inventory of the kitchen utensils at the Monticello plantation that I did via, my normal kiln practice. And then in front is a very large blown glass replica of a cast iron skillet. And so I started making kitchen implements from the actual inventory because unfortunately, like many enslaved people, there are no photographs of James Hemings. There are no photographs of his sister, Sally Hemings. The only reason we have photographs of somebody like Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass is because they were so active in the abolitionist, and in Harriet Tubman's case, both abolitionist and suffragist movement, that there were promotional photos taken of them. So, how do you make a portrait of somebody that there's no picture? And so for me, I started making the portrait through his writing and then all the things that say chef.
Mhm. Right. All right. Any other questions? Yes. Well, we want to thank you very much. I learned a lot. And look forward to what you're doing at Kala right now. Your
Oh,
recipe.
thank you. Yeah, so
That'll
far
be
it's
fun.
been great. Yeah, that work goes into August of 2024. And Kala being a print shop, somehow we'll end up with photographs and prints and books that sort of exemplify the city of Berkeley's first climate equity pilot project. And there's like many different projects going on involving green retrofitting of housing, as well as like e-bike transportation for lower income residents of the city. So yeah, so far, just really a coalition building, just really meeting the players and getting into that. So it's really good.
Yeah, that looks very fascinating. Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's give Cheryl a big round of
Thank you.
applause. Thank you all very much for coming. And WEED is a completely volunteer run organization. And if any of you want to pitch in and help or have ideas, we'd love to work with you.